Welcome to Lindamood-Bell Radio. I'm Dave Hungerford for Lindamood-Bell. Your child can benefit from Lindamood-Bell's renowned instruction anytime, anywhere. Our live online sessions are just as effective as our in-person learning. We provide one-on-one sensory cognitive instruction to help your child succeed in reading, comprehension, or math, whether they need to catch up or get ahead. Make a difference today. Call 800-233-1819 or visit lindamoodbell.com to learn more. Today's episode is a conversation I had with a Lindamood-Bell parent of a student whose challenges confounded both his parents and his teachers. Here it is.
So I'm April. My son is Brian. He's 12 years old and he came to the center for the first time in the spring. He is a really interesting kid. He's always building with cardboard or cardboard boxes, Legos, home things around our house. He's very creative. He gets really deep into subjects like Henry Ford and Walt Disney. So he's a very creative kid. He loves history. He's really smart. He can recall facts of things, battles, and places I've never even heard of, ancient history. And he's been this way since he was little. We knew, this is an interesting, really smart kid, but he struggled in school. Struggle is not a strong enough word. He did middling, maybe till about third grade, but even then we thought this child is underperforming.
Did he start to talk early and everything kind of be on schedule?
So Brian's on the autism spectrum. His speech was delayed, but in an interesting way. So when he was very little, maybe 18 months, he would say things like excavator, backhoe. He loved vehicles and he would correct me. I'd say, a backhoe. And he'd say, no, excavator. But he couldn't use language to communicate. He called my husband mama until he was, I think, almost 3, maybe. Maybe 2, but mama to him meant want or a need. So his language was different. We recognize that as parents. When we went to his pediatrician, I think for his 18-month checkup, we said, hey, we feel like he should be talking. And the doctor said, well, how many words does he have? And we said, well, hundreds. He could label anything, everything, using big words, but he couldn't say I'm hungry or I love you or, recognize me or his dad as having individual names. And so we were confused. And that's kind of been the story of being Brian's parents. We've always been confused because he's done some amazing things, like saying excavator as a tiny child, but then couldn't say cookie, and so we just couldn't figure it out. We did have a daycare worker suggest to us that he be tested. I asked for what. She said, I'm not going to say, just go have him tested. And we found out that he was autistic. And
what age was that?
3, right after his 3rd birthday. We weren't really surprised. We knew that there was something. We didn't know what it was. When I did the research into autism, I said, oh my gosh, this is absolutely it. And we were excited to get the diagnosis because we said, okay, I'm type A and neurotic. If there's a problem, I want to tackle it. Right. And so I was like, we're going to, summon the cavalry and we're going to get it done. So, we got him speech and OT and all the things that you do. And we knew he was going to struggle in school from a behavioral perspective, sitting still and taking turns and that type of thing. But we really didn't expect there to be a lot of problems in school. Although I was concerned because dyslexia is really strong on my side of the family and on my husband's side. And so I was prepared. I was prepared for the dyslexia. I'm like, we're going to tackle that too. But I ended up with this child who was this great reader, right? We would hear him read, and he was a fantastic reader. But I knew something was wrong. He refused to read. And he's a kid, again, with interest in Walt Disney, Henry Ford, battles, history. You would think he would just soak in all the books. He refused to read any words, but he would beg us to take him to the library to look at the pictures. And so I thought, why won't you read the books? But he would not read the books. and yet he loved books. So there was a disconnect there. And then as he got older and, he would have some schoolwork, we would sit with him. And it was pretty evident to me that he did not understand any of the assignments. He would do assignments wrong. If he brought homework from school and say they asked, the worksheet asked to calculate area, he did perimeter. If the prompt asked you to write about common foods in Mexico, he would write about the Mexican Day of Independence. Like there was just, it was sometimes close, but it was never right. And
so in the first and second grade, when you're just learning to do the technical decoding part of reading, was he kind of shining in school and everybody was happy with him? Did you get good feedback from your teachers and principal?
Yeah, he was on time. He was on schedule. I would say a lot of things with Brian, he's like a little bit late and then accelerates. So we knew he was a good reader. Nobody ever said that he couldn't read. In fact, when I would push, because I repeatedly said to teachers, I don't think he can read. I think there's something wrong. And they would look at me like I was crazy and they would say, well, he's a great reader. And I would say, yeah, I know, but I don't think he can read. I do homework with him. He can't do it. And
It's about third grade is when that curriculum usually switches to learning to read, to reading to learn, and getting that content and that comprehension down. That must have been was that when things really started to open up and show the gap, the discrepancy?
it did, but again, because Brian he feels anomalous to us. He had so much information to fill in the blanks. So he wasn't able to read the assignment, but he often was able to draw from what he knew, which I think is why the assignments that he was completing never matched the prompts, but were close, right? He did a lot of adjacent work. And
What if you orally gave him language at that time? Was he able to comprehend that well and
yes,
kind of remember that?
yes,
Yeah.
I think that's where he got a lot of his information was from hearing people talk and, going to museums and because he liked in history. We took him to all sorts of battlefields and museums, and his dad's a history buff, and so they would talk about that a lot. And so, yes, orally, it would all come in and he would hear it. And then I think he took a lot of that knowledge to fill in the gaps in the lower grades, but there was still evidently a problem, and the gap kept growing every year. I think he kind of, plateaued around third grade and just couldn't do it anymore.
What did the school suggest for you?
Um, the schools they didn't have suggestions. We heard a lot of, well, he's autistic, so, and my attitude as a parent was, well, yeah, but autistic kids can learn. He's learning. I think there's a problem. I really think there's a problem here. And we were either told that, well, he's autistic, so you're going to kind of have to accept the progress that he makes. And we also heard, well, he's a behavioral problem, which we knew he was. I mean, we didn't fight that, but again, like behavioral problem, students can learn too. And we just didn't have, I mean, honestly, we did not have a lot of curiosity among teachers, and we sent him to every type of school. I mean, he went to public school, Catholic school, a charter school, a Protestant classical school. Everybody just said, like, well, he's autistic and he's got behavioral issues and he doesn't want to do the work. Like, that's why you're seeing that it's not that he can't, it's that he doesn't want to. And I would push back and say, well, if he doesn't want to do the work, then why is he spending 45 minutes on an assignment that could have been done in 5? Right? And so we just didn't accept that. But as recently as November of 2024, we took him to a neuroeducational psychologist who evaluated him for 4 hours and told us that he was a great reader, above grade level, in fact, and that he just needed more time than other students to complete assignments. Okay, well, I mean, we're giving him hours, eternities to complete these assignments, and it seems to us that he can't do it. but we couldn't get anybody to say that they even thought he had a problem. And I kept researching dyslexia because that's all I knew. And I thought that was a strong possibility because we had so many family members with dyslexia, but I would research it and it would say like the child has trouble with letters, has trouble with sounds, has trouble reading the words. And I would sit and listen to him read very well. So I knew there was a problem, but I didn't know what it was. And nobody could suggest to us what it might be. Um, until finally my husband and I reached our breaking point earlier this year, and he was going to a charter school, and we sent him to the charter school because it was public and they had to provide special ed services. I mean, naively, right? They didn't, and so we were going to sue them. And so we hired a lawyer and we met with an educational advocate whose son had come here. And she says, tell me about Brian. And I'm telling her, and I said, he's really smart. I said, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I don't think he can read. And I literally would say that to everyone. I know this sounds crazy, but I don't think he can read. I mean, I've heard him read, but I don't think he can read. And she said, have him tested at Lindamood-Bell. And I'm literally like, what? Writing it down, Lindamood-Bell. And she said, never heard of Lindamood-Bell before. And she said, my son had the same problem. She said he essentially couldn't read. We sent him to Lindamood-Bell in the summer and he won the 8th grade literature award the next year. And I said, okay, we're going to do it. So we had him tested here, and there's a whole battery of tests, but the test that was most striking was that his decoding was second semester senior year in high school. So could my kid read? Yeah, he could read incredibly well. He was 12 years old.
This is at age 12, right?
At age 12. His reading comprehension was kindergarten. That improved to 3rd grade if the format was multiple choice. And that explains why he kind of muddled through to the 3rd grade, couldn't do it anymore. But essentially, if it was just an open-ended question, kindergarten, which, right, basically means you're not comprehending at all, because kindergarten would be where it starts. And so that was a relief. Just like the autism diagnosis, I said, oh my gosh, they know what's wrong with him. And I knew children had reading comprehension problems, but I thought that went hand in hand with they couldn't read, right? Like if you're dyslexic and you can't really read, or you can't read well, you're not going to be able to comprehend it. But I didn't realize that you could read every word on that page as well as a senior in high school and have no idea what you were reading. Even when we knew he understood the individual words, like he knew hospital and ambulance and teacher and puppy, he just couldn't put it together and hold it. And we did not know that that was a problem. And no one ever suggested to us that it might be a problem.
Kind of two separate systems that run in your brain. I mean, obviously, if you're measuring written language comprehension, the decoding is going to have an effect on that.
Right.
But I think one of the things that's most unique about things that Nancy Bell's written and created is the comprehension side of that. That gets vastly overlooked, and it sounds like you had the experience where educators and therapy providers just didn't have that insight either.
Right.
What was the recommendation that Brian go through when he came to Lindamood-Bell?
So it was, it said, based on testing 5 to 7 weeks. It took Brian 8, and at the end of 8 weeks, it's hard for me not to cry when I say it, but he tested at 6th grade, and that's the grade he was in. And when Liz gave me the test results, I was sobbing. I mean, just like sobbing, because as a parent who went through that for so many years and felt that my child was not seen or heard, and that we as parents were repeatedly dismissed, that was huge. That's his whole future. Sorry. But it's that deep to me, like that's his whole future. And Lindamood-Bell gave that back to him. And I'm going to tell you, his 6th grade teacher, before we pulled him out, essentially said to me, like, we're going to pass him, right? I mean, that has been the attitude we've encountered. Like, I don't care if he graduates. I care if he can read. and do math. Without those things, graduation is meaningless to me. What is my child going to do with his life if he can't read? And honestly, I don't think anybody really cared other than my husband and me, which is what we've learned as parents. Like, you are the only thing standing in the gap. So we're just so thankful to be here.
We're delighted that he's made that progress. And so how's the school year shaping up thus far? I know it's early, but
Well, so Brian's back at Lindamood-Bell for math.
oh,
So he went, he did 8 weeks in the spring, and we gave him the summer off, and he's back to do math. And I think we're gonna homeschool him for the rest of the year, and then hopefully he can go back to school in the 7th grade. But we really just felt like school would be wasted time right now because they're not gonna teach him math. And his math learning was impacted by his language skill, by his reading comprehension issues. He was never really understanding what was being taught in school. And so he wasn't solid in math either. But the interesting thing is he was tested in reading and math in the spring, like in February or January. And just with visualizing and verbalizing, just with 8 weeks of that, his math score went up pretty substantially. It was still below grade level, but just being able to visualize those concepts, the math score went up. And
I'll bet word problems especially.
that's what we saw, is that he got 5 out of 5 word problems right in a row. And I was told it took him less than a minute to do those 5. And I said to Liz, when she reviewed the test scores with me, I said, we would have spent hours with him on those 5 problems. And my husband and I ultimately would have just given him the answer. We would have been like, you know what? It's 14. It's 14 red cars. Just write it down. I mean, he just couldn't do it. He could not do it at all.
How do you feel about the future now for his academic?
Oh my gosh. I mean, so much more positively. Like, I do think that this gave him it changed his whole life trajectory. If you can read and you can do math, then you have your choice of things to do, right? But if you can't do those things, I mean, that was like my concern, like, what will he do in the future? What occupation is there where you can have a kindergarten level reading comprehension and you really cannot do math past the 3rd grade? Like, I can't think of one trade or one college discipline where you would be able to finish, that you'd be able to participate in. So we just didn't know. And we were sure that there was a problem that just wasn't being diagnosed, which is so frustrating. I think I failed to mention, we actually, after the 4th grade, 3rd or 4th grade, we sent him to a reading comprehension program elsewhere. And we bought the full package of hours. And 2 weeks shy of the full package, they said, you know what? He's got it. Like, he totally knows it. He's comprehending everything. We're going to, I mean, you don't get your 2 weeks back, but they're like, you can have those 2 weeks in the future for other things. And he passed all their tests and he went back to school, a month later. And I said, he didn't get any benefit from this. And the thing that I noticed at Lindamood-Bell is at the end of week 5, and it took that long, but at the end of week 5, there was a turn. And I said, oh my gosh, I think it's working. And he started picking up books and reading them. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he would tell us what he was reading, or he'd be in the backseat laughing at a joke. And before, it was just, we would, make him read out loud because we're like, you need to read. You're such a good reader and it's so important. But at the same time thinking, like, I don't think he can read. But there he is, just reading and understanding it and laughing and enjoying it and telling us facts or what's going on. Oh my gosh, Mom, the mountain lion's going to eat the girl in the national park. And we're like, no, don't worry. They won't. Keep reading, but engaging with books and reading them voluntarily. And now he's going back and reading books that have been on his shelves for years that he never read. So I figure we won't have to buy him a new book for a while because he's got so many that he's been given that he never read before. So
Have you noticed any change in his behavior at home?
Yes, like he's working here on math, which he hates, and he hates the math, not working here on math, and he's always excited to come here and work on it. He's working really hard. He's never had a positive school experience outside of like kindergarten and first grade, but at that time he was going to public school and there was a large special ed staff and they were great at managing his behavior, but that was what they were concerned with, right? Was managing the behavior, even if that meant not learning the material, right? Which is, I guess, a function of schools have to serve everybody. And if there's one kid who's not really behaving, then the solution is let's give him basically like crayons and let him color. And I guess it's maybe okay in kindergarten, but by the time we got to fifth and sixth grade, he really needed help. And that wasn't going to come through the school. So, and that's ultimately why we decided not to sue the school, because we said we could sue and maybe even win, but I don't think they're going to do what Brian needs. And we need to take that time and those resources and get him help now because he was 12. I mean, he's way on his way through school. You know, that was every year that ticked by. It was scarier and scarier for us. I think that that's what I've learned the most. Like, trust your instincts. You're right. If you think your kid can't read, they can't. They can't. And even if the school tells you they can't, they can't. If you as a parent believe something's wrong, something's wrong. And don't stop advocating. Don't stop advocating for your child. Don't quit. There is an answer. And this has changed his life. This will change his whole life. And we're really grateful. We're just so grateful as parents. And you know your kid, and you're the one who's going to ultimately find the answers for that child. And 9 times out of 10, when I thought there was a problem, there was, and I was right. And schools will tell you, I think that there's not, because they don't know. It's not their kid. They don't have the time and resources. If your kid has a behavior problem, maybe it's because they can't do the work. I mean, I really think that he couldn't do the work. So he sat there all day in a class. He had no idea what was going on. He couldn't do the assignments. He was bored. That doesn't really justify the behavior, but it sure explains it. And so I think there are other kids out there like Brian, and the parents don't know about Lindamood-Bell. They just don't know. And I'm thankful that we found out, but had we not hired that advocate, had the school done their job, and he muddled through, and we didn't hire the advocate, we still wouldn't know about Lindamood-Bell, and we'd still be saying, what is wrong? What is wrong? And we would not have found the answers. I don't believe that we would have. So I'm just very grateful. Very grateful. So I want to be a Lindamood-Bell evangelist and tell people, anybody who is out there who's struggling, that this may be the solution for their child. And it's worth it.
Well, I think the story is very inspiring. And I know that, I mean, you had mentioned you'd heard a podcast to kind of help you through that 5-week,
Yes.
5th week. And I looked back and recalled which one that was, with the parents from Southern California that we talked to a long time ago. And
It was, yes, because it was week 5. And I did believe, based on his test results, that Lindamood-Bell had nailed it. Like I said, this is right. He does not understand what he reads. It all made sense based on the test results, but we were plowing into week 5 and he did not seem to be, he had not turned a corner, right? And I thought, oh my gosh, what if we go through all this and he still can't read? And I listened to a podcast of a parents with a child. They described their child exactly Brian's situation. And they said week 5, the end of week 5, he got it. And we wish, and it was the end of the summer program, and we wished he had had more time. And they sent their child back the next summer. But Brian had the luxury of, he wasn't in school, so he could keep going. But I told the grandparents, I said, I'm discouraged, but I saw this podcast, and same thing with Brian. End of week 5, the lights came on. We could tell. So
Now they gave you updates, I'm sure, all along the way, the
yeah,
Lindamood-Bell staff.
yeah.
Was there something that you noticed programmatically in visualizing and verbalizing that what made the difference that seemed really different in instruction processes that you hadn't seen before?
I think it being 4 hours of the same, I think that helped him. And I think the one-on-one instruction and, autism is largely a communication disorder, right? And so forcing him to talk and to think in words and pictures about what he was reading and having to tell another person, he would come back and say, I'm exhausted. I just had to talk the whole time, And so I think that having to say it, having to use his words to explain what he was reading and to watch something about the sensory too, which I don't really understand the felt and the jewels, but he did. Like that cemented in his mind what he was discussing, but just watching him one of the things he had to describe was a clown. So just listening to him describe the clown and saying, okay, I mean, he did a pretty good job of describing this clown. It just things that I don't think he had ever done before. And I remember trying to get him to read early on and saying, because he's always bored, I'm bored, I'm bored, I'm bored. And we would say, just go read, you love history, you have so many books, just sit and read. And he would refuse. And I would say, but reading's so wonderfully it's like a movie in your mind. And he did say to me, well, I don't see anything. And I said, what do you mean you don't see anything? And he said, it's just black. It's just blank. And now I understand all of that. I understand that if you can't hold those images in your mind, then how can you remember what the character looked like? Or, we all have that experience if you go to a movie to see about a book you've read and you think, that character didn't look like that. I hate this movie, right? And for him, like the actual movie or TV show, those were giving him the images, but he couldn't make them in his own mind. So he couldn't hold it. And now I understand why he could read those words so well, but he couldn't understand the book. So I think it was a whole bunch of unique things Lindamood-Bell does. Nobody else had ever tried to do that for him before. The only accommodation was more time. But he could have had forever, eternity, and he was still not going to be able to answer those questions or read that book.
More time flailing isn't really helpful.
That's right. And that's the last thing he wanted, right? If you can't read, you really want someone to be like, take all the time you want. You have 4 hours to work on this. He's thinking like, can I just not work on this and do something else? This is like pointless. And I think he thought he would never be able to.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing his story. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone at Lindamood-Bell for what they've done for Brian. It's remarkable.
And thank you for listening. You can reach us at our website, lindamoodbell.com, or call us at 800-233-1819. You can also follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and X. We are Lindamood-Bell.